I says, you coming home for supper? So he says, I'll write you a letter. So I said, you coming home after? So he says, I'll put an ad in the New York Times personal column and let you know.
A forgotten film clip recently surfaced in 2024. It shows Judy Holliday in her final recording session. She looks frail, but her voice is still perfect. What makes this clip devastating isn't what you see. It's what you now know was happening behind the scenes. Judy was hiding a deadly secret that would kill her within just months. She was pretending to be healthy while her body was slowly failing. The woman who made millions laugh was quietly dying. And this clip captures her final performance. Nobody knew it would be her very last. Judy Holliday's story begins like a scene in a play because she was literally born in the middle of one. On June 21, 1921, her mother, Helen Tuvim, was sitting in the audience at a theater when labor pains struck. She rushed from her seat straight to the hospital and gave birth to a baby who would one day charm Broadway and Hollywood. It was as if the universe had staged her arrival. Her mother, a piano teacher, hadn't been at a concert, but at a play, which felt like a sign. From the start, Judy was no ordinary child. She had an IQ of 172, higher than Einstein's estimated 160, yet she would spend much of her career pretending to be the dumb blonde. At 4 years old, she was already in ballet school, learning discipline and focus. While other kids in her elementary class were reading Nancy Drew, Judy was deep in the pages of Tolstoy's War and Peace. She graduated high school at 16, top of her class at Julia Richmond High School, even though she once had to make up arithmetic in summer school. She won a $50 prize for an essay about keeping streets and parks clean, showing the civic awareness she kept hidden behind her on-screen characters. When she was 6, her world changed. Her parents, Abe and Helen, divorced. Abe was deeply political, running 6 times for the New York State Legislature between 1919 and 1938 as a socialist candidate. The divorce left Judy caring for a mother who suffered from severe depression and later a full breakdown. That early weight of responsibility shaped her, making her empathetic on stage but deeply insecure in life. Her name was a story in itself. Tuvim comes from the Hebrew phrase Yamim Tovim, meaning good days or holidays. Judy simply translated it into English, becoming Judy Holliday in 1943, when her group, the Revuers, left New York for Hollywood. The choice felt almost prophetic. She would bring joy to audiences, often working on the very holidays her name suggested, lighting up people's celebrations with laughter. Before Hollywood, there was the Mercury Theater. At 17, rejected by Yale Drama School for being too young, she took a job as a switchboard operator there. On the surface, she was just answering phones, but in reality, she was studying genius up close, watching Orson Welles and John Houseman reimagine theater and radio drama. She was in the building when groundbreaking work, like the War of the Worlds broadcast, was being created. Without realizing it, she was learning how to reinvent familiar stories, a skill that would later make her dumb blonde roles unforgettable. Her big break seemed to come in 1938 when she joined the Revuers, a sharp satirical comedy troupe with Betty Comden and Adolph Green, and sometimes Leonard Bernstein at the piano. They mocked highbrow culture, supported working-class audiences, and even took political risks, performing in mixed-race clubs at a time when it could hurt their careers. Judy was terrified of performing at first, even throwing up before shows and crying afterward, but the troupe climbed quickly through New York's nightclub scene. From the Village Vanguard to Spivey's Roof to the Blue Angel, they eventually reached the Rainbow Room atop Rockefeller Center. That last stop was a disaster. Too big, too brassy, but their following was strong enough to get them a record, Nightlife in New York. and a booking at the Trocadero in Hollywood. Hollywood, however, wasn't kind. In 1944, 20th Century Fox invited the Revuers to appear in the film Greenwich Village, promising them 2 full scenes. But when the movie came out, their parts were cut to almost nothing. Then came the betrayal. Fox offered Judy a contract, but not the rest of the group. The Revuers fell apart, and Judy stayed in California with her mother while her friends returned to New York. Her first film roles at Fox were humiliating. In Something for the Boys, she played a defense plant welder with a single line. In Winged Victory, she played a military wife but hated the way they aged her to look like her husband's mother. These roles didn't just waste her talent, they nearly crushed it. She fought her way out of her contract, convinced Hollywood had no place for her. When she came back to New York, she felt like a failure. She had a new name, Judy Holliday, but no confidence left. Her friends Comden and Green soon found Broadway success, while she felt stuck. She didn't know that in less than 2 years, she would land the role of Billy Dawn in Born Yesterday, a performance that would earn her an Academy Award. In March 1945, a young woman stepped onto the stage of the Belasco Theater. Her name was Judy Holliday. She was 23. Almost no one in the audience had heard of her. A year earlier, she had filmed a small role in Greenwich Village, but most of her scenes had been cut. Hollywood had already decided she was forgettable. But that night on Broadway, something shifted. She played Alice in Kiss Them For Me. A small part, a role no one expected to remember. Yet somehow, she stole the show. Her presence drew the eye even when she was silent. Critics noticed. So did the Clarence Derwent Award Committee. When they announced her name as the winner for Most Promising New Talent, it stunned Broadway. Never before had someone so unknown taken the prize. Overnight, this former nightclub performer from Queens became the one everyone was talking about. A year later, the theater world was holding its breath over a new comedy called Born Yesterday. Garson Kanin had written it for Jean Arthur, the beloved star of Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. She was 45, famous, and at the peak of her career. But only days before the Philadelphia opening, Arthur suddenly dropped out. The official reason was nerves, though some whispered about her crippling stage fright. Others claimed she simply couldn't play someone like Billy Dawn, the brash, uneducated blonde at the heart of the story. Whatever the truth, the production was in crisis. Kanin had to make a choice. He chose Judy Holliday. She was 24. She had never carried a show. Her only Broadway run had lasted 111 performances. Producers thought the decision was madness. Investors threatened to pull their money. But Kanin saw what others didn't. Holliday's wit was sharp. Her innocence felt real. She could play dumb without being dumb, and she could make an audience love her for it. He refused to back down. When the curtain rose on February 4, 1946, at the Lyceum Theater, audiences saw exactly what Kanin had seen. Holliday was perfect. The laughs came naturally. The transformation of Billy Dawn, from clueless to confident, felt alive every single night. The show ran for 1,642 performances. Holliday played Billy in 1/200 of them. 8 shows a week for more than 3 years. By the end, she wasn't just performing the part. She had become it. May 24, 1949, was her last night as Billy Dawn. When the curtain fell, the audience wept. Holliday smiled, but inside she was terrified. She was walking away from steady pay into a film role in Adam's Rib with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. There was no promise of what would come after. What she didn't know was that Tracy, Hepburn, Garson Kanin, and Ruth Gordon already had a plan. Harry Cohn, the powerful head of Columbia Pictures, had bought the film rights to Born Yesterday for $750,000, a huge sum at the time, but he refused to consider Holliday for the lead. He called her that fat Jewish broad. He wanted someone glamorous, Rita Hayworth, maybe Lucille Ball. He claimed Holliday lacked sex appeal. In truth, he didn't understand her talent, and he didn't want to. That's when Hepburn made her move. She suggested Holliday for the supporting role of Doris Attinger in Adam's Rib. The role was rewritten to showcase her. Hepburn even tilted scenes, so Holliday had the best angles. She leaked stories to the press about this unknown actress stealing scenes from two Hollywood legends. By the time filming wrapped, the buzz was impossible to ignore. Holliday was runner-up for the New York Film Critics Award before the movie even opened. Cohn caved. The same man who had dismissed her was now announcing she would star in the film version of Born Yesterday. When the movie came out, she won both the Golden Globe and the Academy Award for Best Actress, beating Bette Davis and Gloria Swanson. The girl who had once been nearly erased from a film now stood at the very top of Hollywood. But just months later, on March 26, 1952, her world changed. She was called to testify before the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee, accused of having communist ties. Her name had appeared in red channels, a blacklist that could end careers. The timing was cruel. She had just learned she was pregnant with her first child. The questioning was aggressive and laced with prejudice. They even made a point of repeating the Jew in her name. Columbia Pictures brought in top lawyers and former FBI agents to defend her. Her legal team told her to play Billy Dawn in the hearing, act harmless as if politics were over her head. She followed the advice. She pretended confusion at sharp questions, twisting words to throw the committee off balance. When asked if anyone had tried to prosecute her, she acted as though she had misheard and said, "Prosecute? I thought you meant persecute." It made the senators look foolish. She never named a single name. This act was a survival tactic. Psychologists today call it the fawn response, using charm and vulnerability to protect yourself from a threat. Holliday, a highly intelligent and politically aware woman, shrank herself into a ditzy persona to keep working. It saved her career, but trapped her in the dumb blonde image forever. Even so, she was blacklisted from radio and television for 3 years, from 1950 to 1953. Those were the fastest-growing and most profitable mediums at the time. The blacklist hit her earnings hard. Worse, the same people who published the list also offered, for a high fee, to clear names from it. Columbia paid for help to repair her image, but she never again reached the same career heights. The emotional toll came out years later in a conversation with her friend, journalist Haywood Hale Brown. She told him, "Maybe you're ashamed of me because I played Billy Dawn. Well, I'll tell you something. You think you're going to be brave and noble. Then you walk in there, and there are the microphones and all of those senators looking at you. Woody, it scares the shit out of you. But I'm not ashamed of myself because I didn't name names. That much I preserve." On January 5, 1948, Judy Holliday married David Oppenheim. To the outside world, it looked like a perfect match. Two brilliant, artistic minds coming together. Oppenheim was a gifted clarinetist with the New York City Symphony, a man destined to run the classical division of Columbia Records. They had met in the mid-1940s through Leonard Bernstein. And here's the twist. Bernstein had once considered marrying Judy himself. In 1943, he even wrote to Oppenheim that he'd given some thought to marrying Holliday. The connections ran even deeper. Both men saw the same therapist who tried to cure them of their homosexual leanings, as it was called in those days. Oppenheim struggled with his sexuality throughout the marriage. and neither of them could truly talk about it in that era. They moved into the prestigious Dakota Building in Manhattan, where Judy tried to juggle a skyrocketing career and the role of a supportive wife. But for her, the marriage was more than love. It was a way to feel stable and respectable in an industry that often left her feeling alone. On November 11, 1952, Judy gave birth to Jonathan Louis Oppenheim. She was 31, and her career was at its absolute peak. Just 18 months earlier, in March 1951, she had won the Academy Award for Best Actress for Born Yesterday, beating legends like Bette Davis and Gloria Swanson. Yet she walked away from major film contracts and stage offers to focus on her child. In that era, few female stars dared to take such a long break without risking everything. The timing was even tougher because it was the height of the McCarthy blacklisting years. Judy was already losing television and radio work because of political suspicion. Her son's name honored his father and, some say, Leonard Bernstein. His middle name was Louis, close to Louis. Jonathan lived quietly and passed away in 2019, one of the last direct living connections to Judy's legacy. By March 1957, the marriage was over. The divorce shattered her. After 9 years together, she was left emotionally wrecked and financially stretched. The timing couldn't have been worse. She was just starting to rebuild after the blacklist nearly ended her career. Hollywood life had become tense. As one friend put it, everything revolved around Judy. Miss Holliday's schedule, Miss Holliday's commitments. After the split, her lifelong battle with depression deepened. Money was a constant worry. Even with an Oscar on her shelf, she struggled to support her young son and her mentally unstable mother, Helen. To make matters worse, Oppenheim married Ellen Adler, daughter of acting teacher Stella Adler, just months later. For Judy, this was the beginning of her most fragile years, when she sought comfort in work, and later in her secret romance with Jerry Mulligan. Mulligan was a baritone saxophonist and a legend in the cool jazz scene. Their relationship began in the late 1950s, and it was nothing like her marriage. He was unconventional, bohemian, and came with his own troubles, drug addiction and legal problems. But he fascinated her. He was 15 years younger than most Hollywood leading men, and spoke the same artistic language she did. They were lovers and collaborators. Mulligan even appeared in small acting roles, including in Bells Are Ringing, Judy's final Broadway triumph. The love was passionate, but messy. With Oppenheim, Judy had chased stability. With Mulligan, she found raw honesty. They kept the relationship quiet, not just for privacy, but because unconventional love could ruin a career in that era. When The Marrying Kind opened on March 20th, 1952, people thought they knew exactly what they were walking into. Judy Holliday had made her name playing the funny, lovable blonde who could make any room laugh. This was Columbia Pictures, directed by George Cukor, with a budget of $1.7 million. Surely it would be another light comedy. It wasn't. Written by Garson Kanin and Ruth Gordon, the film was built to break her typecast. And it did. Holliday's performance was deep, raw, and so full of quiet pain that audiences hardly recognized her. The story, told in shifting flashbacks, followed a working-class couple facing divorce and the shattering grief of losing a child to drowning. The style felt closer to Italian neorealism than Hollywood gloss, with real glimpses of 1952 New York instead of studio-perfect sets. People left the theater stunned, as if they had just discovered an entirely different actress hiding behind the comedy all along. 2 years later came It Should Happen to You, and this one was personal. Holliday had survived something most actors didn't: a brush with the House Un-American Activities Committee. It was the era of blacklists and careers ending overnight. Released on February 24, 1954, and costing $1.4 million, the film wasn't just entertainment, it was proof she was still here. The story followed a woman who rents billboard space to plaster her name across New York, chasing fame before fame even knows she exists. In a strange way, it predicted today's celebrity culture. The film also introduced a young Jack Lemmon. Though Columbia's Harry Cohn nearly ended his career before it began by suggesting he change his name to avoid the shadow of Lennon. Holliday's presence was sharp and full of life, a quiet act of defiance after her testimony before Congress. She had faced them with dignity. Now, on screen, she was reminding everyone she could still command an audience. In 1956, she starred in The Solid Gold Cadillac. This was the role she loved most. Unlike the bubbly characters she was known for, this one let her show her real intelligence. The film came from a Broadway hit that had originally starred Josephine Hull, but the movie version went back to the idea of a younger woman in the role. Holliday was 34, sharp, and perfect for it. Almost all of the film was in black and white, but the last scene burst into Technicolor, a clever visual trick that audiences remembered. Her character, Laura Partridge, began as a small-time shareholder and ended as a corporate reformer, fighting the powerful with wit and smarts. For Holliday, who had fought her own battles against political suspicion, it felt close to home. Critics saw the performance as proof she could play sophisticated women without losing her warmth. And then, she vanished. From 1956 to 1960, there was no Judy Holliday on the big screen. Publicly, the story was that she was busy with Broadway. She was starring in Bells Are Ringing, which opened in November 1956 and ran for 924 performances, winning her a Tony in 1957. But behind the scenes, things were harder. She was never officially blacklisted, yet the industry kept her at arm's length. It was a quiet freeze-out, the kind that doesn't make headlines, but ends opportunities. She was also struggling personally. Depression had crept in. She was beginning to show signs of throat cancer, the disease that would later take her life. By the end of 1960, she had a tumor that required surgery, discovered not long after she left the out-of-town tryouts for Lorette. Those 4 years away from film weren't just a gap. They were lost years in what should have been her prime. When she finally returned to movies, it was with Bells Are Ringing in 1960. It was her old Broadway role, brought to life again for the screen. MGM poured about $3 million into the production, with Vincente Minnelli directing and Arthur Freed producing. On paper, it was perfect. In reality, it was hard. Holliday was heavier, anxious, and carrying the weight of 4 years away from film. Her romance with co-star Sidney Chaplin had ended. She disliked parts of the script and even asked to leave the film after the first week of shooting, but the producer refused. There were tears, illnesses, and delays. Still, Dean Martin's calm energy helped her through, and her real-life boyfriend, jazz musician Jerry Mulligan, even made a cameo. Somehow, in the middle of all that, she gave a luminous performance, one that moved easily between comedy, romance, and music. The movie earned more than $4.5 million worldwide. In November 1956, Judy Holliday stepped onto the Broadway stage in Bells Are Ringing and completely changed the way people saw her. Just a few years earlier, she had been known almost entirely as the dumb blonde from Born Yesterday. Now, she was singing songs by Jule Stein, performing dances by Jerome Robbins and Bob Fosse, and earning standing ovations night after night. The New York Times critic Brooks Atkinson wrote that she had added a trunk full of song and dance routines without losing any of her doll-like charm. The show quickly became a hit, And with songs like Long Before I Knew You, Just in Time, and The Party's Over, it cemented her as a true musical theater star. In 1957, she won the Tony Award for Best Leading Actress in a Musical, a victory that proved she was far more versatile than Hollywood had ever given her credit for. Her ability to push herself was nothing new. Back in 1949, she had done something most performers would never dare attempt. She played Billy Dawn in Born Yesterday on Broadway 8 times a week, while at the same time filming Adam's Rib during the day. The schedule was brutal. One role demanded big projection and endless energy for live audiences. The other needed small, controlled gestures for the camera. She would shoot scenes in New York during the day, race to the theater at night, and keep this up for months. When she finally left Born Yesterday at the end of May, she went straight to Hollywood to finish filming. Katharine Hepburn and director George Cukor were so impressed with her skill and stamina that they publicly claimed she stole the picture. That period of pure endurance ended up changing her career forever. It was the reason Columbia Pictures finally gave her the lead in the movie version of Born Yesterday, a role that won her the Academy Award for Best Actress. Most people thought her squeaky, naive voice was natural, but it wasn't. She had built it on purpose. Born Judith Tuvim to Russian Jewish parents, her name came from Yamim Tovim, the Hebrew phrase for holidays. She grew up with music. Her mother was a piano teacher, and she had classical training long before the public ever knew her. In the late 1930s, she performed with the Revuers, a comedy troupe that included Betty Comden, Adolph Green, and Leonard Bernstein. The work they did together shaped her timing, her ear for music, and her understanding of how comedy and vulnerability could work together. Film historian Bernard Dick pointed out her rare ability to switch from humor to heartbreak in a heartbeat. George Cukor saw it too, saying she had a way of touching the heart when you least expected it. Her famous dumb blonde act was carefully crafted, hiding sharp intelligence beneath a playful surface. In February 1960, she stood on Hollywood Boulevard, smiling as she received her star on the Walk of Fame at 6901. On the surface, it was the perfect moment. Her career was celebrated, and her final film version of Bells Are Ringing had just been released. But behind the scenes, things were changing. Only months later, in October, she left the out-of-town tryouts for a play called Lorette because of illness. Newspapers said it was just throat problems. In truth, doctors had found something far worse: breast cancer. Back then, people didn't speak openly about it. She went through surgery in 1961, losing her left breast, but outside her closest circle, no one knew. Even the press was told she had a bronchial illness. Then, in May 1965, her doctors decided there was nothing more they could do. She was admitted to Mount Sinai Hospital on the 26th. Just 12 days later, at 5:00 in the morning on June 7th, she died in her sleep. She was 43 years old. There is one coincidence that still unsettles people who know her story. Her final Broadway show, Hot Spot, opened in April 1963. It struggled from the start and shut down after 43 performances. She was 43 when she died. For some, it feels like an eerie piece of fate, a number that framed both her last Broadway moment and her final year of life. But her story didn't fade away. Decades later, the off-Broadway play Smart Blonde brought her back into the spotlight. Andrea Burns stepped into her world, even recreating the Olmsted recording studios where Holliday and Mulligan had made music together during her illness. The play showed the clever woman behind the dumb blonde act, a persona she used as armor, even when questioned before the Senate for alleged communist ties. Fans now walk tours of her old New York neighborhoods, from Greenwich Village to Broadway. tracing her steps. In 2017, producer Gene Kirkwood secured the rights to her story, sparking talk of a film. Rare recordings from 1964 have surfaced, her voice rich and clear, even as cancer was taking its toll.